We're going to make my favorite placemats, and I'm going to show you how to make them classy and easy, and you're going to make more and more of these because they're that much fun. We're going to start with the backing. This backing is for my napkins and for my placemats. It takes 2 yards to do a set of 4. I've got the front of my placemats. This is a pre-printed one. I'm trimming it out, and then I trim the backing so it's a little bit bigger than that. Then I'm going to layer battleizer, backing, and the placemat on top of that, leaving myself enough room, at least a little bit more than an inch around the outside edge. The backing must be bigger than the placemat, and I do this actually before I'm quilting this. And so then I'm going to do is draw diagonals for the quilting. When I draw my diagonals on this, a lot of times I'll use a 30-degree angle instead of a 45 or a 90-degree angle, and it makes it more interesting. I actually make them about 3 inches apart because battleizer doesn't require that much stitching. I love using a Soline Duo pen on this because I can actually see it really well throughout. However, my other favorite is a Chocoliner, and I like the Chocoliner, the triangular shaped one. It works better, it lasts longer. Do the straight line quilting. Your stitch does not even have to be really that close. It can be a little bit longer. It'll go pretty fast. The Duo pen, when I'm done quilting, will actually erase those marks, and they stay away. It's not like some of the other ones that keep coming back. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to trim 1 inch around the placemat. So I'm trimming away my backing, and I'm just trimming an inch all the way around all 4 sides. If I were to trim this a little bit bigger, my frame is going to be wider, but trust me on this, that 1 inch is good. If you've never done this before, try it on a smaller piece and your first example, and then it'll make more sense. Now what I do is I take my flange and I fold a 1.5 inch strip of fabric in half, press it with best press, and then I put that on all 4 sides. You can add the flange before trimming the backing too. You don't have to do it that way. So I'm going to review now the flange detail. So when I create this flange, then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to stitch that on all 4 sides. As you notice, I'm trimming off my selvage, and I unfolded it. I love using the best press on this because it makes it nice and sharp. And then I'm just taking that along the side of the placemat. And so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to stitch it about 1/8 of an inch away from that edge. And it's your choice how far away you want to stitch it. I like the 1/8 of an inch because then it gets me as close to the edge. But also my foot, my presser foot on this one, I'm using a 97 foot on a Bernina. I can also use a 37 in there, and I can line it up in there. So then I go in here, and on the end of that placemat, then I just trim it off, and all I do is just pick it up, and then I turn it, and I just layer the 2 over each other. And so I come all around the outside edge of that piece, and I come up to the end, and I trim that off. Now this one that I'm showing you in particular is actually the dinner napkin, but it works the same for the placemat. And as you can see, I go in there, and I just trim it flush with that corner, pick it up, trim off my salvages again because I went to another piece of fabric, and I just turn and keep going around all 4 sides, and that's how this flange just gets fitted into there. I didn't have to piece things together. I'd prefer not to piece together because I wouldn't like to see a diagonal seam in that. And so I just go around all 4 sides and get those things put in there like that. So that's what I do with that. So the flange is a really great add-on. This is a piece that shows it with the 1 inch around the outside edge, and the flange is attached to it. Now in this one, we're going to get close up on how I do the detail, the last detail on doing that frame. And this is a really fun way to do this. So now I've got that flange on there. I'm 1 inch away. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually not going to go to the ironing board, but I'm going to finger press this. So what I'm doing is I'm taking that raw edge and I'm finger pressing that in right up next to that flange piece. So I go all the way around this whole thing. Now I've pressed my fabrics before I started sewing this with best press so that it has a little bit of sharpness to it. And so when I'm going back and pressing this, I'm less likely to distort it if I'm finger pressing it. I don't need it to be a really sharp press, but I just need to I'm going to kind of boss it around a little bit. So when I get up to that corner, watch what I do with this. All I do is I just turn and I start finger pressing it again. I actually don't even work the miter in there. I just straight press it because I'm going to work on this as I go when I'm showing you how I'm going to sew it. So I'm going to go around all four sides of this, finger press it. You can use a wooden iron here in this. That would be a cold iron. It's not a hot iron. Like I said, I don't really like to put heat on this because when you put the heat on it, it tends to distort it a little bit, and that's just half of an inch that I'm folding in there. So I really don't want to boss it that much where I'm putting heat on it. Plus, honestly, this goes pretty fast when I go around that outside edge. It doesn't take me a lot of time to do to get it into place, and that's just a finger press. And you can see with that best press in there, it keeps it in place. It does what it's supposed to do. So I go around all four sides of this. This is a sort of job that it's kind of a quiet job to do. It goes much faster than you think it does. Even in this piece, when you're watching it, it's kind of methodical to do, and it creates such a nice finish when you push that in, because what you're going to do is that when you're sewing that edge, I'm actually going to sew this about an eighth or a 16th of an inch away from that edge. So I want that to lay down really nicely so that my needle goes into place well. As you notice on this, is I'm not going through a lot of fabric when I stitch this, so I want it to have a good, I want to have a real sharp look to it, and I want it to be really professional looking. In fact, I firmly believe that you can't buy dinner napkins that look this nice anymore. They just don't make them. And I mean, this is a fussy little detail, but it's a lot easier to do it this way than to do like a piping or something like that in there. And it's actually pretty fast to do. And these wash up so beautifully. So when this dinner napkin is done, it's going to be a double layer of fabric. So all I'm doing at this point is I'm just tucking that in. And I'm actually still using my number 97 foot on my Bernina. I'm using, if you notice on that edge in there, you could use an edge stitch foot. I prefer not to, because once I get up to miter that corner, it's going to require a little bit more finesse to get into the corner. So I really don't want the bar of an edge stitching foot along that edge. So now I'm coming up to my last corner, and now I've pulled out a tailor's awl on this, and my tailor's awl is going to help me to get that corner really, really nice and sharp. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, and before I go too far, I'm going to take my nice little sharp scissors, and I'm going to trim a little bit of bulk out of that corner. Now, like I said, the first time you make this, the first time you do this technique, do it on something really small so you can experiment with it and see how it works. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to sharpen that corner. I'm going to do a 45-degree turn on this. Let me get in there a little bit closer for you to see. So that is folded under. I'm doing my 45-degree in, and now I'm going to finger press that 45-degree in there. Now I'm going to come back and go back. You remember when I bossed all that outside edge in there? There is already a little bit of a fold in there. So I'm going to take my tailor's awl here, and I'm going to hold on to that corner, and then what I'm going to do is I'm raising my presser foot with my freehand system, so I'm pushing over on my knee on that, and then I'm going to get that corner down there really nice and sharp. And now I'm going to use my tailor's awl. I'm going to lower my foot, and I'm going to get my needle up there just a couple of stitches so that I can catch just that corner. And this is the sort of detail that you can see. Most other people can't see it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my turn. And you remember when I did all that pressing around the outside edge? Well, now I'm going to just take a couple stitches, get it all lined up, be ready to go down that last side. So now when I go down that next side, I'm just going to go along that edge. And that's why we pressed all that edge under on this whole thing, so that we could keep moving forward. And as you can see on this one, the edge of that fabric is just riding inside the edge of that toe. I'd say it's probably about a 16th of an inch there. And on this one, I'm using an Aurifil thread. I believe I probably used a light gray, even though the background is blue. Light gray is one of my favorites. This would be something that as you get going with these things, you've got some really pretty decorative threads. You could have done a decorative stitch in there. There's a lot of other things that you can do on that edge. But of course, if you did a decorative stitch that had a zigzag, you can no longer use that straight stitch foot, your number 37 or 97, because you would break your needle, of course. So what I'm going to do on this is that I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do my next corner. Now, talking about that foot, if you have problems with breaking a needle, there's a lot of machines out there right now that many of you have that you can actually tell it what foot you have on the machine, or if you have a straight stitch plate on there. So then if you would go to put a zigzag stitch on there, it won't let you stitch. So if I told the machine that I have a 97 foot on the machine, then it wouldn't let me widen that stitch because I would break my needle running into the foot. So there I go again, up there picking up that corner. And so now I'm going to flip it, and again I'm going to turn it, and I'm actually going to take like maybe 2 or 3 stitches and have my needle drop in the down position, and then I'm going to reposition it and line it up. Now I will tell you, on one side of this was one of the dinner napkins that I did. I actually didn't leave myself a full 1 inch around that cutting. So this side that you see me working on, it's not a full inch on that side. And I kind of ascribe to the done is better than done perfect school of thought on something like this. That side is not going to bother me. I mean, I'll probably be the one that ends up with that dinner napkin on my plate, but it's not going to bother me at all to do that, because I wasn't going to go in and buy another half a yard of fabric to do those dinner napkins. Now when you do the dinner napkins, like first off you're cutting, like if you bought a kit from us, you're going to be cutting the backing for the placemats. And you don't want to be too frugal on how much fabric you use there, but you also want to look ahead and say, how big do I want my dinner napkins? Sometimes I'll cut too much for the backings, and then my dinner napkins are 16-inch squares. Sometimes they're 18-inch squares. It just kind of depends on how much fabric I have for that backing that I get going with this. I have been known to sew a strip of fabric around the outside of a backing to get it stretched around. And I think this fabric for this particular placemat that we did was such a pretty, it is such an incredibly pretty fabric. The tomatoes look so real that you can almost taste a summer tomato on this. So, but I love this little flange effect in here. As you can see, it was incredibly easy to put together. It's not a tough accent to do. You can actually use this technique on a lot of other things. This would be great for table runners. This would be great for wall hangings. It's not really kind of I wouldn't do it on a quilt that I was going to have judged at the state fair or anything, but it's just a nice little finish to do, and it goes really fast, and it's very professional looking. Now those mitered corners that you see there, those are not stitched down, they're folded in, but as you can see, there's a lot of fabric folded in there. You could, if you were concerned about that picking up, you could do a couple things. One is when you get to those corners, you could go in and stitch in and come back out. Another thing you could do is you could put some steam-a-seam or fusible inside of there and fuse that down. But I use this technique without nailing those corners down, and I've really never had a problem with it. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and trim that out. I'm pretty darn happy with that. There's my dinner napkin. All the edges are just sharp and pretty. Isn't that just so lovely, the way it's all put together? So all 4 corners clean, sharp, and like I said, this is the placemat. The dinner napkin this is the dinner napkin. The placemat is exactly the same thing. Nice back on it. Now, as you can see, I probably could have fussed a little bit more with bringing my threads up from the back. I was using my thread cutter on this, and so then I have to go back in and I have to do a little trim out with that. I love those really sharp point scissors. The other one is on the back of this, we have 2 lines of stitching. So the first line was the flange line that I stitched in. If you wanted to not have a flange line in there, I'd recommend you use a wash away thread on that, and that'll clean out that first line of stitching. But again, I don't think it really detracts from the finished piece. So the napkins, the fronts are smaller than the back, as I was telling you. And then on this one, this is the front of the napkin. That's the back of the napkin, just 1 inch larger. And that's about the right amount of size to put around that. So these were really fun. They're a great summer project. Thanks for shopping with us, and thanks for supporting us. Take care. Bye-bye.